I'm Dana Sparks, broker with Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors. And today's contract tip has to do with sellers' disclosure forms. We had a situation last Friday. We had an agent call representing the buyer. They were sitting at the closing table. Actually, it was a two-part closing. The buyer had already signed their documents and was not at the closing. However, the buyer did not agree to close, was going to close in escrow. Here is why. And the seller was at the closing table wanting to sign the contracts to close, but wanted to actually close. So here's what happened. They did the walkthrough the night before, which, as you know, we're not doing that the day before anymore. But anyway, did the walkthrough the night before, and the seller had removed all of the fixtures, all of the curtain rods and the blinds and all of the fixtures from the windows and left the holes. So the buyer wanted the seller to come back and repair all the holes from the fixtures they had removed. So here's the deal. The deal was the seller stated that in the seller's disclosure form, they stated that they were going to remove all of the fixtures and that the buyer did not specifically request anything about having any holes repaired or anything like that. The seller further, the listing agent went by the contract, the part in the contract where it states that the seller warrants at the time of closing with the property will be in substantially the same condition as it was on binding agreement date. So the seller said, well, at binding agreement date, the holes were in the walls. Not quite sure I buy that one. But nevertheless, that was their contractual point of view. The buyer stated, however, that yes, although the seller did put in the seller's disclosure form, they were taking all of the window treatments, the seller's disclosure form was never made a part of the contract. So the buyer did not sign the seller's disclosure form, so it was not referenced as an exhibit. It was not made part of the contract, and the seller never countered back, including the seller's disclosure form as part of the contract, where it specifically states that the seller was removing all of the fixtures. Additionally, in the seller's disclosure form at the bottom where it specifically states, and the seller didn't put it as a special stipulation, where it specifically states the property items, we're talking about the GAR forms now, where it talks about the property items that a seller is leaving or taking with them, the personal property items. On the bottom of the seller's property disclosure form, it specifically states, in removing all items, the seller shall use reasonable care to prevent damage and, if necessary, shall restore the area where the item has been removed to its original condition. Holes in the wall were not original condition prior to installing the window treatments. So here's the deal. Can't have it both ways. The seller cannot say, well, in the disclosure form I said I was going to remove the window treatments. Either if the seller was going to do that, then they had to restore the walls to the original condition prior to installing those window treatments. If that is not part of the contract, then they had no business taking down the window treatments. So can't have it both ways. There are lots and lots of issues right now regarding sellers including property disclosure forms as part of the contract. So just pay attention to that. If there is one buyer, if you're representing a buyer, you probably want to include it as part of the contract. Those warranties of the seller will survive closing. If you're a seller, you may want to consider if you want to include it or not. But if you are not including a seller's disclosure form as part of the contract, remember, with the disclosure laws, the seller and you as the licensed agent must disclose any material defects. But if you're talking specifically about personal property items that a seller does want to take with them, either make sure that disclosure form is attached as an exhibit and referenced as part of the contract, or add those items as a special stipulation. So bottom line, seller agreed to pay a vendor $500, actually I think it was $300, to go back and repair the holes that had been left by removing those items and paint and spackle. Thank you so much for watching. Again, Dana Sparks, qualifying broker with Maximum One Greater Atlanta Realtors, satisfying your needs with service, innovation, and education.